All right, so for those of you who may remember, we have the Okaloosa County Sheriff deputy who shot and killed an airman who he was called to their home, and he came to the door with the handgun in his hand, although it was pointed down. And as soon as he came to the door with the handgun in his hand, he was killed. He shot him, killed him, and now that man has received the bond. So let's see what exactly happened here, and then we'll chime in after.
Okaloosa County Sheriff deputy sat in on his pretrial detention hearing after being charged with felony manslaughter in the killing of Air Force senior airman Roger Fortson.
Eddie Duran is out of jail after posting bond. Fox 10's Brendan Kirby has the story now from Fort Walton Beach.
Prosecutors wanted a high bond, the defense a low one. In the end, the judge ordering Eddie Duran Jr. held on a $100,000 bond. Deputy Duran was responding to an apartment complex for a report of a domestic disturbance, which turned out to be false. Body camera footage shows Airman Roger Fortson coming to the door, armed with a handgun but pointing it down. Deputy Duran fired multiple times, according to investigators. Defense lawyers Rod Smith and Mike Flowers asked for a $10,000 bond, arguing that their client poses no threat to the public or a risk to flee.
If that were a risk, we wouldn't be here. He wouldn't have come. He is here. There is no danger to the community.
Assistant State Attorney Mark Alderman argued for a $250,000 bond, noting the severity of the charge, manslaughter with a firearm, which carries a maximum penalty of 30 years in prison.
This is a case where we all know what happened. We've all seen what happened. It's just a question of the interpretation. We've all seen that Mr. Duran killed Roger Fortson.
Smith argued in court that Duran had a reasonable fear, given that he was responding to what he believed to be a volatile domestic situation.
Found himself confronted with a man who had armed himself and comes to the door and answers with a Glock in his right hand.
In addition to setting the bond, Judge Terrence Ketchel ordered the defendant not to have contact with the victim's family or witnesses, but he denied a prosecution request for electronic monitoring. He said he didn't think that was necessary. Duran has an arraignment for October, although he's waived his right to personally appear for that. He'll next be in court in December for a pretrial hearing. Reporting.
All right, so this is one of the more unfortunate situations, actually. Couple of things. Number one, for those of you who out there who are Second Amendment supporters like myself, let's state a couple of facts here. If you are a person of color, particularly a black man here in these United States, in certain counties and in certain states more so than others, it is not okay for you to come to the door after the police having been called in suspicion of you committing a crime. In this particular case, domestic abuse. It could have been anything. It could have been jaywalking. All right. You do not get to answer the door with a handgun in your hand and expect to live. Okay. That is not common sense in these days and times. Yes, according to the Constitution, you have a right to bear arms. You have a right to defend your home. You have a right to defend your life and property, particularly in a state like Florida and a county like Okaloosa. But for you, person of color, particularly black person, it's not wise. Furthermore, anyone who answers the door, white, black, or otherwise, with a handgun in your hand after having been called, and after the police haven't been called, and they have likelihood to believe that you are engaged in a crime, domestic abuse or otherwise, it is not intelligent to answer the door with the handgun in your hand, rather it's pointing down or not. It's brandished. These guys are already in fear. I think by now it's safe to say that we can't trust our lives in the hands of law enforcement, because that's what you're doing. If you answer the door like that, you're depending on some paper and some people to submit to that paper and be loyal to that paper in order to save your life. A document, rather. It's a living document. And although you and I may be respectful and considerate of that document called the U.S. Constitution, it's plain to see now that in many cases, law enforcement officials are not. They simply are not. So it makes no sense to continue to do this over and over. And then there's this outcry looking for sympathy. Now, this particular one is tragic in the sense that it's not as egregious on behalf on the side of the police officer like it was in, say, a George Floyd or Philando Castile being killed with the seatbelt on and this and that. It's not as egregious as that. It's kind of an unfortunate one because this deputy is going to be used as a political football and in all likelihood a sacrificial lamb for an organization, law enforcement, to get them looking better, to get a public image improvement, especially in a state like Florida. They'll be more than happy to send a deputy, particularly of non-white origins, let's just call it what it is, into the abyss and sacrifice you on behalf of the integrity, quote unquote, of their organization, of their institution. So again, folks, this is tragic in many ways. Lessons that we can learn: don't come to the door armed. When police have been called and the suspicion is that you've committed domestic violence, don't answer the door with a handgun or a rifle in your hand. Unless you intend on fully using it, right? Or you intend on, you understand fully what the case is, then so be it. But if you intend on just being treated with respect and police officer de-escalating and whatnot, that is a nonsensical approach that I would not recommend and that we do not sanction here at Twin Cities Audit. We do believe that we have the right balance as it relates to the American spirit and how we need to progress and move forward on these issues. And it is not one-sided. It can be complex at times. And there are many unfortunate things that happen between citizens and law enforcement. We want to bridge the gap. We want to make it better. We don't believe that one side should trump the other as far as citizens and law enforcement. We believe that we need to cooperate and live with one another in mutual respect. So take the lessons. Tragic situation, unfortunate. If it's to be, the changes that need to be made, if they're to be, if it's meant to be, it's up to you and me.